Bojo. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jen Shaw, the lead finance advisor with GovernWise, and I'm happy to do this webinar for you. So just bear with me. I will share my screen. Okay, so today we are going to talk about developing a work plan and budget. So first of all, what is a work plan? So a work plan is your yearly plan on all of the activities that you are planning to do within the upcoming fiscal year. This work plan is going to break down strategic goals and objectives into smaller, more manageable pieces. And the good thing is this also identifies costs. That's really going to help moving forward into a budget for these individual programs. An effective work plan ensures more accurate departmental budgeting. So you'll see part of this webinar, we've combined the work plan and budget to show you just how easy it really can be. So a work plan identifies what specific activities are required to meet your goals, who will be responsible for helping to complete each of these tasks, when each activity will be undertaken, and the sequence of any linked activities. And this comes into play a lot for capital projects when timing of events are important, how much each activity will cost and how it will be funded. So really think of it as a step-by-step recipe for something you've never made before. You need the what, the who, the when, and the how. So the work plan breaks down First Nation strategic goals and objectives into the small, manageable pieces. This ensures that all of the essential activities are planned, reducing the chance of overlooking anything that may be essential. Again, looking at any activities where the sequence of events is important, this is very crucial for that so that they are not overlooked. It allocates tasks efficiently to individuals, no duplication. There's nothing worse than pouring time into an activity only to find out somebody else has already done it. So not a good use of time. So really makes sure that time management is included in there. It establishes a schedule that can be tracked and monitored. It sets expectations for progress and establishes accountability. So within that work plan, when you're identifying who is responsible for certain things, it ensures that accountability is there as well. And it helps develop a more accurate budget and ensures adequate funding and other resources are available. Work plans need to be developed by program managers, program staff, and/or key team members who will be implementing them. So in the past, historically, work plans were only done on a departmental basis, and most times it was only the department manager who was responsible for doing an overall work plan. So that's really difficult. We really encourage program staff to start developing their own work plans. And then the whole department can meet as a team and consolidate or bring them all together to create the overall departmental work plan. It's much easier doing it this way than having a manager trying to uh, figure out all of the different programs and activities that will be done. Virtually impossible. So it's really, really important to include your program staff in creating work plans. So that overall departmental one, once all of the individual ones are done, we recommend, having a meeting, discussing all of the different activities and really collaborating in order to draw that overall departmental plan together. So as you develop your work plan, you should always, always be referring to your nation's strategic plan or a comprehensive community plan, because you really want to ensure that all of your activities throughout the year are going to be reaching or supporting the overall goals of the nation. So the steps in developing a work plan, number one, you're going to identify the projects or programs that will be undertaken to meet your nation's goals and objectives. Number two, you're going to identify the specific activities that will need to be completed to meet the goals and objectives. So keep this process simple. So the key is to understand the work that needs to be done to meet those First Nation goals and objectives. Step number three, you define who is responsible for each activity. So you should always think about these different factors when identifying who will be responsible for them. The skills and knowledge required for the specific activity, the availability of the individual. Does that person have time to help support it? The individual's interest and motivation in carrying out the activity, the level of authority or positional power required for the activity, and the natural groupings of activities. Step number four, you want to determine when each activity will take place. You estimate a start and end date and the total time required to complete the task. Again, the total time required to complete the task, the number of days as shown in the slide, is more for any projects where you have those consecutive events taking place. So you really want to ensure that you're starting and ending with a sufficient amount of time in between to keep those tasks going. I always recommend that if you don't have a specific time, estimate the quarter that you're going to be doing it in, or even just the month. So it doesn't have to be really, really specific, but this also will help keep you on track when you intend to implement those activities, and also will help you with the monitoring and the outcomes that you're hoping to achieve as well. Number five, you're going to estimate the costs for each of the activities. So there's essentially four types of costs. We have labor, materials, other direct costs such as travel, telephone, etc., and indirect costs. So those are overheads, our office rental, utilities, any admin costs. Most times the salary and the indirect costs are already allocated to your department by finance. So any additional costs over and above these allocations should be included on your work plan. And we'll show you a little example later on. Number six, you complete the work plan, which is basically just repeating steps 2 to 5 for the rest of your goals and objectives. Number seven, review and revise your work plan on a regular basis. So once you have your work plan done, it's not just, oh, here's my work plan, I'm going to put it on a shelf. A work plan should be treated as a living document. You should be reviewing it on a regular basis. Monthly, if not quarterly at a minimum, is what we suggest. Anytime you have any new funding that may be added to your program, add it to your work plan so it's always current and will always support your budget as well. Next, we'll go into building a budget. We're going to do a whole exercise at the end that draws this all together so you can see how easy it will be. At least that's what we're hoping here. So a quick overview. We'll talk about what is a budget, the budget cycle, and then how to create a budget. So what is a budget? It's a tool used to direct work within an organization. It's used to track income and expenses in a detailed enough way to make good operational decisions. And a budget typically offers more detail on how money is spent than a cash flow statement does. And it provides greater context for making tactical business decisions. Here we have a quick look at the budget cycle. So we start right on the top here, and we're going to go through these steps. But just so you can see the nice visual, I know a lot of people appreciate the visuals here. So number one, you're going to agree on the goals and understand the current financial situation within your nation. Step number two, you're going to determine the revenue. We determine the expenses. You get to develop that draft budget. It then goes to chief and council. The budget is approved. Any decisions made over a budget should be documented within those board meeting minutes. The budget is then implemented by staff. You monitor the budget and make amendments as required. Again, when you get a funding amendment, those amendments do have to be included in your budget, then has to go back to chief and council. Not necessarily your whole budget, but that additional dollars in the amendment should always be going back to chief and council, documented in the minutes before it's then implemented. And we just keep on going around in a circle. So breaking down the steps, step number one. So before you even start your budget, you really should take a look at the strategic plan for the nation. And in the event that a nation does not have one, we do have some samples as well that I'll go over. Or if your nation has a community comprehensive plan, a lot of times the goals and objectives of the nation can be found within that document as well. So you really want to understand these goals, and they really are overarching goals, but you want to prepare your work plan and hence your budget um, with activities that support these goals. Step number two, you're going to determine the revenue. So you should do this for the period to the best of your ability. Beyond funding or beyond revenue from funding sources, uh, ensure you include any return on investments, any interest gained, any sales, own source revenue. And one thing that I did not include on this slide is deferred revenue should also be looked at when you're planning your budget. Deferred revenue or anything that can be carried forward from the previous year. Step number three, you're going to determine your expenses. So once you know how much revenue you have to work with, then you start determining the expenses. And three main categories for those are the fixed costs, variable costs, and make sure you include any one-time expenses as well. So step number four, developing that draft budget. So once you've determined all of your revenue and expenses, this is when we will discover if you have a budget surplus, which means you have more than enough revenue to cover your expenses, or whether you'll have a deficit. So if your expenses exceed your revenue, you will run into a deficit. That is the flag to perhaps prepare something for chief and council if your nation has a type of spend plan or however you could access any own source revenue. Ensure you follow those steps if you have a deficit. Or that could also be a trigger to, if you have a great idea that you want to incorporate into your programming, maybe there's another source of funding that you can access out there in order to almost subsidize the funding that you're already receiving. Because we know First Nations do not receive enough funding to run their programs. So we're always encouraging to look out for other revenue streams as well. Step number five, approve the budget. So as mentioned, all budgets should be going to chief and council and approved on a yearly basis. One other thing to note about the importance of budgets, if a budget is not approved by chief and council, when it comes time for audit, if there is no budget, It's deemed as part of a lack of internal controls and is actually kind of counted as a little strike against you. So the the goal is always to get a fair opinion from an auditor. So keep in mind, approving a budget yearly is one step closer to ensuring that you do get that fair opinion. Number six, you want to document budget decisions. So as mentioned, a working file should be kept that documents all of the information um, to the budget and why the decisions were made. So this could come in really handy if a new manager, let's say, comes in and decides, I want to do this new project. However, years ago, a prior manager thought the same thing, and for whatever reason, the project was not feasible. So you really want to make sure that you're not duplicating things that were already proven to be unfeasible or unsuccessful. Number seven, you're going to implement the budget. This is where the program managers and staff start executing the budget through their programming and projects. And this is where they start implementing their own work plans. So you can see how those two correlate. Step number eight, monitor that budget and make amendments as required. So all amendments, and those of you that work in finance will know that there are a lot of amendments that come in throughout the course of a fiscal year. I've seen nations that can get up to 50 different amendments throughout the year. So it's really, really important to document all of these amendments, and they really should go forward to Chief and Council for formal approval um, at the Chief and Council meeting following when that amendment was received. Now, I know some nations, because of the volume of amendments, will choose to gather them and present them on a monthly basis, which is great as long as they are following the process and getting that formal approval by Chief and Council as soon as possible. And I should also note that once the amendments are approved, it's really crucial to inform your program managers and staff of the additional funding so that it can be worked into their work plan. There's nothing worse than starting to review things at year end and discovering, oh, we have this money that our managers didn't know of, and then we run into that crazy year end spending. So we always try to be proactive. So two types of budgets. We have a capital budget, which relates to the costs associated with plant and equipment. And we have an operating budget. So the operating budget is the normal day-to-day operations and expenditures, payroll, supplies, program expenses, and that type of stuff. And there are two types of budgets within an operating budget. We have sales budgets and expense budgets, and we will be discussing expense budgets. So what is a program budget? It's an expense budget for a program that is consolidated into a departmental budget. So what are the benefits of a program budget? So the program managers can then identify the project's objectives and goals they want to achieve and the resources needed. Program staff can provide important contributions and information. And this is why we really encourage program staff to develop their own work plans and not just leave it up to the program managers. So before you start creating a program budget, the first thing you should do is review last year's budget. A lot of times that funding is renewed yearly, whether you have that agreement in place when you start developing it. Um, that's always a great, great starting point. So when you're looking at last year's numbers, ask yourself, was there a surplus or a deficit? Can any of these line items be adjusted to reflect actual expenditures? You may have a budget from last year and realize your expenditures far exceeded those budget numbers, so you can do some adjustments there. What are the department's priorities for the year? Perhaps last year there was a big event being planned that's not going to happen this year, so take those into consideration as well. Does the department need more staff? Are there areas where costs can be reduced? Is the budget flexible? And are the activities in line with overall First Nation goals? So that last one, by completing that work plan, you're already ensuring that all of your activities are in line with the First Nation goals. So now we'll focus on the bigger parts of a budget, determining the revenue and determining the expenses. So determining your revenue, you want to identify all sources and amounts. Keeping in mind, many programs funding is renewed yearly. You should identify any anticipated carry forward amounts and identify any deferred revenue to the best of your ability. And again, the carry forward and deferred revenue, you really need to work with your finance department in order to ensure that you have the correct numbers. Going to determine expenses. So you're going to identify and calculate your fixed costs. So this can be done by finance through standard monthly entries. And this is done where the fixed costs are then allocated monthly to each department. So not to each program, but to each department. The fixed costs are any expense that remains constant over time. So a lot of times they're locked in by some form of contract. So it's easy to anticipate and account for them. So some examples: salaries and benefits, overheads such as rent and insurance, a phone, data, and software subscriptions can fall into this category as well. Debt payments and any other expense that's regular and expected should be included in your budget as well. Then you're going to identify the variable costs. And this is where a lot of the estimating comes in when it comes to the programming. This includes your materials, workshops, food, rental costs, any extracurricular activities when you're dealing with children's and school age programming. Any special events and consultant fees would also fall under this category as well. So the variable costs, just what it says, are expenses that vary over time depending on a lot of different things. So some things that you could keep in mind as well. Sometimes shipping and distribution costs could be higher at certain periods. Utilities, they're more expensive in the winter than in the summer. So keep that in mind when you're estimating costs. And program supplies, material costs, and labor costs. So you want to ensure that you review your budget carefully with the finance department to ensure that your expenses are properly allocated. If you ever come across any items on your budget that you think should go to another program or department, discuss that with finance. There may be a reason why it is being allocated to your department and not to another. We always have to keep in mind there's eligible expenditures within certain types of programming. So that could be a reason why, but anything that you may feel does not belong on your budget, you really should discuss that with your finance department. So once the program budgets are all done within a department, they're all rolled up or consolidated into an overall departmental budget. Then we go one more step, and each of those departmental budgets are then rolled up or consolidated into one big operational budget. And that is what is presented to Chief and Council for approval. Okay, so now we are going to go into a little activity here, and I'm not sure how I'm doing for time. Oh, pretty good, half an hour. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. Well, Sample First Nation has received an amendment advising that additional dollars have been added under the existing funding agreement. So create a work plan and budget for this funding. So I'm just going to stop sharing and reshare a different screen. Here we go. Okay. So before we get right into it, we talked about strategic plans. So in the event that, and I know most nations either have one in place or are working at um, developing one currently. If your nation doesn't have one, if you can't find a copy, um, First Nation Financial Management Board, I'll make my screen a little bit bigger here, um, has some good samples within their strategic planning process document. So I've just pulled them here just to give you an idea of what strategic goals look like. And as I mentioned, they're quite overarching. So this will give you a good idea. So a sample priority, people learning and using traditional language in daily life. So we know language is a huge thing for all nations, revitalizing the language. So oh, my page got cut off a little bit here. But even within this sample document, it also gives you an idea, some sample activities that you could do in order to meet that goal. So to meet priority one in this example, you could increase the number of language opportunities for preschoolers, school-aged children, youth, and adults. You could utilize traditional language more in the workplace. You can increase the use of traditional language in communication with external stakeholders. So you see, it gives you a good idea of the activities that are, they could be incorporated in a lot of different departments and programming, not just necessarily for the indicated preschool or school aged, but just to give you an idea of some of these priorities. Another one, self-determination for and by the First Nation. So some of the activities that you could do, bring membership code to ratification, custom election codes, communication strategies, First Nation leadership policy, increase own source revenues, develop a central database for information to improve data management. So again, a lot of different activities. Another example, maximize personal economic choice and opportunity. So again, some activities, increase the number of community members in trades, training, and apprenticeship. Can increase the number of post-secondary grads with diplomas and degrees. Could provide infrastructure, including high-speed internet to First Nation to support economic development. So again, you can see how a lot of these activities will cross over a lot of different departments. So when you're looking at your own nation's strategic plan, look at it kind of with an open mind. You can see all of these different activities that would fall under something like personal economic choice. It's not necessarily just economic development. Just some other samples I'll go through really quick. Um, maximize economic opportunity for community benefit. It's another good one. People living the First Nations way of doing things. So a lot of this priority is important because it creates pride in doing the nation's way. So again, a lot of different sample activities here that can be used for programming. Pride in a safe and secure community. We have excellence in education. Maximum control over the First Nations traditional territory. Living a healthy lifestyle. So again, those are just some sample strategic priorities that I just wanted everybody to have a good understanding of what some of these goals would look like. Okay, so back to our little exercise. So We have now received, Sample First Nation has received an amending agreement. So for those of you, this is, and I've just taken a PDF document and put it into Excel because I struggle sharing screens here. So I hope everybody can see this okay. Some of you may have seen an amending agreement and possibly not. So this is what an actual amending agreement from Indigenous Services Canada looks like. You always have this agreement number. It's going to be your original agreement number. So most are in 3, 5-year, some may be in 10-year agreements now, but that would be the original agreement. So the year that agreement was put in place. You'll have your amendment number again. It's X'd out here, but I have seen, you know, over 50 being received by a nation in a year. So it's important to have a system in place to track these as well. So this amendment between Canada and Sample First Nation, the parties wish to amend the agreement in the amount of $112,810. Then we have the regular legalities here. They are including Schedule 4, which is the program service budget, and Schedule 5. All other terms remain the same. And we've got the signature page. So Schedule 4, that is always included with an amendment, pardon me. So 5.0 is the adjustment detailed report. Now you can see where I've highlighted in yellow. This is the additional funding. So this is the adjustment. This is the adjusted funding. We can see the program service area is the First Nation Child and Family Services. It's the program inventory is community well-being. And we can see here that it is a community-based initiative, pardon me, and specifically it's for a community support worker. Now it shows that you'll have a $1 payment in April, which a lot of times when you get new funding, you will see that $1. And that's just to test to make sure that it's flowing through. And then we have the next payment you can see will be flowing in the month of May. So depending on when this agreement comes, you may see it in October. That would be your key that you only have, you know, X number of months. You don't have the full 12 for this funding because you always want to look at it up until March 31st. The next part of this amendment is Schedule 4. So the 1.0 program service budgets, authorities, and schedule of monthly payment plans. So Schedule 4 is a complete listing of all of the funding. However, it also includes that amount that is being added as part of the amendment. So you can see this is the Schedule 4 that was sent. What I've highlighted here in yellow. So we've already had some existing funding you can see for CFS immediate relief funding. We've had some band rep reimbursement. So the new one is added within the existing. So now we have that child and family services, the community support worker with our 800 or 112, 810 being added into the agreement. Okay, so the next step is to go into our work plan. Now that we know that it is for a community support worker, we have the funding total. This is going to be a new position within the nation. So on the screen now is a sample work plan template. So I know a lot of nations have used work plans in the past, and a lot of them are in Microsoft Word. You'll notice this one is done in Microsoft Excel, and that is because we have added the component of cost right within the work plan. Because by doing that, again, as I mentioned, it's going to make transferring these over into your budget so much easier. So historically, if you have used them in Word, they are set up basically the same, except now you have your organization or strategic goal. Some have just been labeled as goals that the person hopes to attain in a year. Normally the goal would come across the top. We've just changed it and organized it differently in order to have that cost component and those auto calculations. Now, this is a blank one, and because of time, I do have a sample one where we have already actually worked through it. And sorry, I'm going to get rid of this stuff here. I forgot to delete it from the last time. So here is our sample work plan for this community support program worker for Sample First Nation. So as a community support worker, we look at the strategic goals of the nation and we see the health and well-being of community members is one of the First Nations strategic goals. So that works out well for this position. What can um, this community support worker do to meet that goal? How about developing some community-based programming for youth? That could be one goal. So as we look at that, what are the different activities that you would have to do in order to develop that programming? And this is very general. You could establish a weekly youth group. You could create a monthly calendar of events. You could arrange resources for workshops and have 10 workshops per year, thinking that over the course of a year, we'll do 10 workshops and not count July and August because that's the summer and kids may be traveling, they may be summer employment, so we won't do the workshops throughout the summer. And you always want to put reporting to the funder because most program staff, program managers do have to do some type of reporting, whether it's, whether it is to the funder, to the supervisor, or to chief and council. Then you're going to identify who is responsible for each of these. So you can see that community support program worker is going to be responsible for all of these tasks, with the exception of that funding or the reporting to the funder. You always want to make sure that any type of reporting, if it has a financial component to it, you definitely want to prepare this report in collaboration with your finance department. You always want to ensure that the numbers you are reporting on are being drawn directly out of your accounting software because those numbers are looked at. Even though we think we submit these reports and ISC doesn't even look at them, they actually do. And they compare these numbers to your audit. So we always want to ensure that the numbers being reported are drawn out of your accounting system. Okay. The resources required for this weekly youth group. So we think it's going to be 40 weeks, again, taking out those couple of months for the summer. We're hoping to have 15 youth attend, and we're going to need snacks. Got to feed the youth to get them to come out and keep them happy. So we figure $100 a week. So we have our cost line. So if we have 40 weeks times $100 a week for snacks, we have our total cost of $4,000. So what else might we need for that weekly youth group? Well, maybe we're going to need a facilitator or for the workshops. So we're just going to think, well, we'll assign $5,000 a year. And again, much better. This is very general and not detailed for the sake of time. The more detail and the more breakdown you can put, and the closer to actual costs without just doing what I'm doing here with a 5,000. If you know a facilitator or you have them in mind, you know previously that you've been paying, say, $300 for every facilitator come in. Use those actual numbers. Again, just for demonstration purposes, I'm keeping this quite general and generic. Your honoraria, if you have elders coming in or any type of guest speakers that are not giving you an invoice for services. Most times we do have honoraria as well. So we're going to assign $2,000 for honoraria to cover the youth programming. So another activity that can be implemented is, how about a monthly craft workshop for youth? So again, we'll look at that. We think we're going to need a facilitator. And for this one, we're going to do $200 because in the past, that's what we've paid. And again, we're going to have 10 of these workshops in the year. So $200 a workshop times 10 workshops, we have that $2,000 total. Then we think, oh, supplies and materials for the monthly workshop. So if we're going to have 10 workshops, supplies and materials will probably vary depending on the types of crafts we're doing. However, we can think we'll put a budget limit of $250 per workshop. So we have $2,500 total. Another activity that can be done, how about some youth outings? We could take them out every month, go to the movies, go bowling, some outdoor rec. Community support worker would be responsible for that. So some of the resources, we have admission fees and transportation to get them there. So we are estimating $500 a month for 6 months for these youth to go out on various outings. So we have $500 a month times 6 months for a total of $3,000 for the year. And now we're all done with that community-based programming for youth. Well, community members don't just include youth, they also include adults. So how about we'll develop some programming for adults as well. We'll develop monthly workshops on a variety of topics. And again, variety of topics, this is where you would also identify what type of topics, if you have them in mind. That will also give you a better idea on the costs involved for each of these workshops. I've seen some nations that will really break it down by each workshop they plan to have every month and really nail down those costs so that you're not just going on general estimates, which, sometimes can be too low or sometimes can be too high. And if you do have them too high, you really want to make sure they're more in line with the actuals, because that will free up those dollars that you can then put towards other programming. Okay, so the monthly workshops. Again, we're figuring $200 for a facilitator, and we are going to have 10 workshops within the year. So 200 times 10, total cost of $2,000. Supplies and materials. So again, we have those 10 workshops. And for now, we will put in, again, $250 budget for each of those workshops for a total of $2,500. I'm going to back up a little bit because I missed this one right here, which is important. Um, so because the adults also could include the elders, perhaps under responsible for these workshops, you would put the community support worker and also the elders program. So there's a lot of times when your programming could overlap and you could work collaboratively with other team members and possibly hit, um, you know, more of your target groups and increase participation in some of your programming. So the last thing, and this is what reminded me of the elders program, we're going to provide some transportation assistance for, adults and elders to get to the workshop. So we have a community van, and we've agreed that we will pay $100 um, for each workshop to get people there. And this will likely be a transfer over to a different department, but we still want to identify that within our budget because it is going to be a cost. So we have that $100. Again, we're thinking about the 10 workshops. So we have a total cost of $1,000. And then we've got that program covered. So something else that might be done in order to meet that health and well-being of community members, client support. So some of the things that that community support worker would be doing, client interviews to determine the needs and supports that are required. So the community support worker would be responsible for that. So perhaps you have a lot of clients that are off reserve. Lots of First Nations are situated close to bigger towns or centers, and maybe it makes sense to get some rental space in the urban center that's close to you where your nations are. So we've thought about that and decided, okay, we're going to rent a private office space where we can go meet with clients a couple times a month, and we will be paying $200 a month for this space um, over the course of a year for 12 months. So $2,400 for that rental space. Another thing that this worker will be doing is developing support plans for clients. So a laptop is going to be needed. We will put in a total for that of $4,000, which is going to cover a laptop and a printer and, the stuff that they would need to have in order to deal with their clients, printing off files and etc. Another activity, they're going to identify and provide referrals and act as a liaison with other supports. So for addictions, housing, employment, etc. So for that, a cell phone is needed. So, and depending, some nations will outright provide a work cell phone for staff, and other nations will provide an allowance. Um, and that is when the staff will be using their own personal cell phones for work. So an allowance is given to offset some of those expenses. So in this example, Sample First Nation does a $50 a month cell phone allowance for their staff. So $50 times 12 months is a $600 expense. Then we have travel and mileage, and this one could be hard to gauge, especially if you're in a new position. Um, and for uh, these purposes, we will put in $2,500 for travel. I'm looking at my time and thinking I need to hurry up. Okay, the last activity for this would be to enhance recreation activities for the target groups. So the activity would be to work with recreation manager to determine scheduling and event coordination. So again, you'll identify that rec manager just so you have that quick visual that, oh, I need to speak to this person about it. So we'll need some regular gym space. We don't anticipate a cost being there because it's our gym. So we're looking for an in lieu. So we'll just assign a 0 there. However, we are going to want to have refreshments. So we have refreshments at $500 and we'll think of 6 different events throughout the year where we will be looking for those refreshments for a $3,000 charge. Goal number 2, and I've only done 2 goals in this example, thank goodness, or we would really run out of time. But culture and language, which is also another huge one across the board with all nations. So we've got an activity to revitalize ceremonies and traditional teachings. So this one is very, very general. Plan elder and youth activities to allow sharing of knowledge and traditions. Lots of people could be involved in this one. The community support program, the elders program, culture staff. You can get schools involved in there. So this one, there could be a lot of collaboration with. For this example, we decided 4 weekend retreats. So we're going to have weekend retreats with elders and youth, have a little kind of a language immersion weekend. And $3,500 is what we're assigning. Again, it's recommended you break this down into accommodations, etc. But for this purpose, we are just assigning a flat rate. So we have 4 retreats at $3,500 each for a grand total of $14,000 for the year. And the second activity is to develop a language strategy. So you're going to identify language holders within the community. So how are you going to do that? Maybe you'll put out a call. Maybe you'll have a community meeting to go over this where refreshments are needed. So we'll just put down a little $250 for refreshments. You're going to call out for interested community members to sit on the committee and then hold monthly meetings once established. Okay, so I guess that's where my line is. This is kind of all together. So we'll do the refreshments. We may have some honoraria there, a facilitator. I don't think we'll have any travel. And supplies and materials. I added this one from my previous one, so I'm not sure what I'm looking at as far as my budget. I think we're going to be way over. So right now, I'm actually just going to leave these lines blank because we are running out of time. So quickly, just to kind of wrap this up and show you how it would transpire over into that budget, you can see that I've color coded these, and I did this beforehand already with the eligible expense lines that were identified within that approved funding. So we have some travel, workshops, program supplies, and overhead. So you can see I've already gone ahead and color coded them. We get down to the bottom. So we have our total right now, it's grabbing everything of $50,750. We can break these down to put into our budget. So we have our travel, which is yellow. So we would do equals, go back up to the top of the document and pick every cell that is colored yellow. So we would do the 3,000 plus, 1,000 plus, 2,500 plus. And if we had anything there, we don't, we'll add it anyway. So travel, 6,500. Workshops, all the green, again, equals, and then we'll choose each cell, plus, 2,000 plus. You can see how the cells are changing color, so you know which ones you've grabbed. 2,000 plus. And we have that big 14. We'll add these ones even though there's no dollar values in there. Whoops. Now see, it's seeing we found a typo because I put an extra plus sign in here. So you want to accept it? Yes. Now we've got our total, 25,000. Program supplies, all of the blue, we'll do this again, equals, we've got 4,000 plus the 25 plus 25, 4,600, 0, 3,000, the 2,500 and 0. Again, 16,850. Then we get to our overhead, which is gray. Only one gray one, and that is that rental space, because remember, that is one of those overhead costs is rental. So we've got our rental costs there. So again, now we have it all broken down. You can see our total, 50,750, jives with the running total of everything above. Okay, so work plan is done. Just a couple more minutes. I know we're at 12 o'clock. Now we're going to look at this budget form. And again, this is kind of a snapshot of what we would encourage you to set up your accounts for each individual program as well. So given information, we have our ISK funding of $112,800. We have no other revenue to work with at this point. So go down into the expenses. Again, given information. Sample First Nation has a salary scale in place, and this position has a salary of $45,000. The MERC, the mandatory employment related costs, which is your CPP, your EI, health deductions, pension, etc., is calculated at 12%, which is kind of low, but we'll use that. So again, we can do a formula here. We will do equals, we'll grab that $45,000 and times by 12%. So our benefit total is $5,400. Okay. Fixed costs are allocated to each department. Okay. And the overhead is a 10% admin fee. So again, 10% admin fee is normally imposed on any funding, which is used to offset all of the administrative costs that are not covered under any type of funding. So we will again look at that total revenue. It's 10%, so we'll times 10%. So we have our overhead of $11,280. So we have some blanks here, travel, program supplies. So let's take a look at our budget again. So we have our travel line. We do an equals right here. We go back to our plan, our sample work plan. We have our totals down here already. By putting an equals in that other one, we can grab this total. And there it is, $6,500. Next, we're going to look at our workshops. Okay. So again, we have our workshops. We go back to our work plan, that $25,000 for workshops, and boom, there it is. Our program supplies. We have it right here, 16,850, and boom, it's there. Oh, I wiped out I was wondering why there was an empty line there. Okay, so now we're looking at our overhead, because remember, we have $2,400 in overhead. This one, a little bit more complicated. You are going to want to put brackets around because of BEDMAS, which is brackets, exponents, division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. Okay, and then we're going to add that overhead of 2,400, and we have 13,680. Somehow my formula wiped out here to total my expenses, so we'll quickly sum that. And you can see, look at how close we were. We have $370 of surplus dollars from that budget. So really, you could look at that you could go back and you can say, hey, I have my refreshments here. We could up that now to $500, you see? And now this is all auto tabulating and it follows through over onto your budget. Now you only have 120 bucks again. Now, what if you had, let's say, $20,000 for your weekend retreat? Now you see, now you have a deficit. So by really linking your work plan and your budget together in this fashion, um, really makes things so much easier when it comes to transferring them over. So, and just to give you a quick snapshot, if you are using Sage 300, this is basically what should be printed out of the system. And again, we always encourage to have, these different expense items tagged directly to the program as well. There is nothing worse than lumping all of your workshops under one workshop thing and then having to go and piece out what program did what workshop. Because in most cases, when it comes to year-end reporting for the funders, for chief and council, for your community members, this information is going to be needed, and it's going to be needed to, it's going to have to be segregated by department, by program as well. So just a few little tips on how to keep things easy. I say easy because, I've developed these spreadsheets. I know how to use Excel. That being said, we do have these templates available. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. We do have these templates available. I have other bigger ones that probably lucky for you guys, we've run out of time because I do have budget spreadsheets available for any department managers that would like, any program staff, stuff that will consolidate up into whether you want to consolidate it into a departmental work plan, or sorry, a budget, or an overall. So I can work with finance managers as well to get those departmental budgets in to roll up. So we've got a lot of good templates available, a lot of good resources. So I hope everybody has gained a little bit of insight and maybe are not feeling so overwhelmed by the idea of having to do a work plan. I know it may be a new concept for a lot of people. As mentioned, program staff are now really being encouraged to do these. And, it's very empowering as well for program staff to be able to do this because you're really then kind of in charge of your own activities. You're writing your own story, so to speak. You're not doing just what, yes, you have a job description, so you have certain activities that, you are being measured on, but your day-to-day activities are basically then your story. You can write that. And as long as you have everything accounted for and the budget, the revenue to support it, then that's great. So I know my apologies that we have run over time. Previously, we've done this in two separate sessions, so I really tried to condense it down to really demonstrate those linkages between the work plan and the budget. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, I know we're over time. Feel free to email me, email contact@GovernWise. Again, I'll just put a little plug in there for any of you on the webinar now. If you'd like some extra support with this, if you think it would be beneficial for us to do a virtual session with your staff, come on site. We're also looking at delivering this kind of out in communities in a more regional approach. So look for some upcoming dates for things like that as well. But yeah, so Anybody who has seen me on a webinar or even in person knows that I talk and talk and can't stop. So I will stop now, turn it back over to Maddie, and I appreciate everybody taking the time today to attend this webinar. And again, I hope you found it useful and some valuable tips.